Captain Jake Morrison watched the monitors at the Outer Rim station, his concern deepening with each passing second. 5 years at this remote post had never shown him anything like the chaos unfolding before his eyes. The signals from New Haven Colony grew fainter and more frantic by the minute. New Haven was humanity's most distant settlement from Earth. 12,000 people lived there, building farms across rolling plains and parks where children played on alien soil. The colony fed 6 neighboring human systems and stood as proof of what humanity could achieve among the stars. Now those same screens displayed nothing but devastation and ruin. The final message crackled through the speakers, static barely masking the terror in Commander Lisa Wright's voice. She led New Haven's defense forces, and Jake had spoken with her countless times through routine calls. She was steady, fearless even, but now her words carried absolute despair. "This is Commander Lisa Wright of New Haven Colony calling anyone who can hear us. The Zaphirian Hegemony has shattered the ceasefire. Their fleet arrived without warning and they're taking no prisoners. I repeat, no prisoners." Explosions thundered through the transmission, making her words difficult to catch. Jake leaned toward the speakers as if closeness could somehow help those already beyond saving. "They have hundreds of ships overhead. Our defense platforms lasted maybe 10 minutes before being wiped out. They're using orbital bombardment that turns everything to glass. The farms are gone. The schools are gone. The hospitals are burning." Another explosion roared, then silence. Jake held his breath, waiting for Lisa's voice to return. "Tell Earth we held our ground as long as possible. Tell them the Zaphirians didn't just hit a military target. They're killing everyone, men, women, children, all vaporized by weapons that turn our world into a wasteland. This isn't war. This is genocide." The transmission dissolved into static, then nothing. Jake stared at the silent speakers, knowing 12,000 human lives had just been erased from existence. His hands trembled as he reached for the emergency system that would carry this news back to Earth. For 30 years, humanity had kept an uneasy peace with the Zaphirian hegemony. The reptilian aliens controlled nearly a quarter of the known galaxy, their military power legendary. The ceasefire had survived minor disputes and border clashes. But this was something entirely different. Within hours, long-range scouts confirmed what Jake already knew in his heart. New Haven Colony was gone. The planet's surface had become a sheet of black glass reflecting its sun like a mirror. The atmosphere had been stripped away, leaving only a dead rock where thousands of families had once lived and worked and dreamed. The news traveled through quantum networks across vast distances between stars until it reached the blue world that had birthed humanity's expansion into space. In the halls of the Terran Defense Council, emergency meetings began as soon as reports arrived. President Amanda Collins had been a military officer before politics and had seen combat in the Outer Rim campaigns against pirates. She understood war, but what happened at New Haven Colony wasn't war. It was a message written in innocent blood. "They didn't just attack one of our colonies," she told the advisors around the conference table. "They attacked the idea that humans can be safe anywhere in this galaxy. They want us to know they see us as nothing more than insects to crush when—" Convenient, Admiral Ryan Baker commanded all official fleet forces and had spent his career planning for the day the fragile peace might shatter. He leaned forward, studying tactical displays showing human and Zaphirian positions throughout the galaxy. "Madam President, our intelligence networks have tracked Zaphirian fleet movements in that sector for months. This attack was planned well ahead. They've been building up forces and testing our response times. New Haven Colony was chosen specifically because it was isolated and far from our main defenses." President Collins stood and walked to the massive windows overlooking Earth's capital city. Millions of people moved through streets below, living their daily lives, unaware their species had just been marked for possible extinction by an alien power that saw them as expendable. "How quickly can we mobilize response fleets?" Admiral Baker consulted the data in his hands. "With current active forces, we could have 1,500 warships ready for deployment within 1 week. That represents nearly half our total fleet strength." "That's not enough," Collins said without turning from the window. "Not nearly enough to send the message that needs sending." It was then that Secretary of Defense Paul Carter spoke up for the first time since the meeting began. His words carried weight that made everyone stop and listen carefully. Madam President, there's another option available to us, but it would mean revealing capabilities we've kept secret for over 2 decades. The silence that followed was complete. Every person in that room held the highest security clearance. But Carter's words suggested secrets beyond even their knowledge of humanity's military capabilities. Explain what you mean, Secretary Carter. Carter stood and activated a holographic system that filled the conference room's center with 3-dimensional images. Instead of showing the modest fleet numbers in all official records, the display revealed something beyond comprehension. Project Deep Harbor, Carter said quietly. 23 years ago, after the first contact wars with hostile alien species, we decided humanity would never again be caught unprepared for galactic conflict. We've been building ships in secret using automated shipyards located in deep space between star systems where no alien eyes could find them. The holographic display rotated, showing vast construction facilities orbiting dead stars in empty regions beyond explored space. Shipyards the size of small moons stretched across entire solar systems, creating industrial capacity that defied imagination. How many ships? President Collins asked, her voice barely louder than a whisper. 700,000 active warships with another 200,000 in various stages of completion. Admiral Baker had commanded fleets across known space for 30 years and thought he understood the scope of human military power. Now he sat staring at the holographic display, mouth hanging open in shock. The Zaphirians believe they know what humanity is capable of, Carter continued. They see our official fleet numbers and public colonies and diplomatic missions. They think we're a young species limited by small territory and modest resources. They have no idea we've been preparing for this war for over 20 years. President Collins felt something cold and hard settle in her chest as she watched the display showing humanity's hidden armada. They destroyed New Haven Colony to test our resolve. They wanted to see how we'd respond to genocide. They wanted to know if humans would fight back or simply accept our place as victims. She turned to face the room, and everyone present could see the change in her features. They're about to learn that humans don't accept anything. We take what we want and destroy anyone who tries to stop us. In the deepest reaches of space, where light from the nearest star took centuries to arrive, Captain Maria Santos received the activation codes she'd hoped would never come. She'd been stationed at Deep Harbor Station Alpha for 3 years, commanding a skeleton crew that maintained the vast automated shipyards floating in endless dark between galaxies. The station was enormous beyond imagination, stretching across space like a metal city built among stars. Docking bays held thousands of completed warships that had never seen combat, while assembly lines continued building new vessels using resources harvested from dead planets no living being had ever visited. All hands, this is Captain Santos. Her voice echoed through every corridor and chamber of the massive station. We've received Priority Alpha authorization from Earth Command. Project Deep Harbor is now fully active. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Around her, the station erupted into controlled chaos as officers and crew who'd spent years in quiet routine suddenly found themselves at the center of the largest military mobilization in galactic history. The skeleton crews that maintained these hidden fleets were about to become the command structure for humanity's revenge. Lieutenant Ben Parker looked up from his communications console with eyes reflecting both excitement and fear. Captain, we're receiving activation signals from Deep Harbor stations throughout the entire network. Alpha Sector through Zeta Sector are all coming online simultaneously. Santos nodded grimly as she watched status displays light up across the command center. The Deep Harbor project had been divided into 6 primary sectors, each containing massive shipyards and completed fleets positioned in different regions of empty space. She'd always wondered what threat would require activating all 6 sectors at once. Now she knew. In the harbor bays, stretching beyond the station's viewports, lights began flickering on across ships that had sat dormant for years waiting for this moment. The vessels themselves were works of engineering that pushed the boundaries of possibility. Sleek destroyers bristled with weapon systems that could crack asteroids, while massive dreadnoughts carried enough firepower to level entire cities from orbit. Each ship had been built using technologies developed in secret laboratories hidden throughout human space. While the galaxy thought they understood human capabilities, these vessels incorporated advances in energy shields, plasma weapons, and faster-than-light travel that surpassed anything other species had achieved. "Captain," called Chief Engineer Danny Torres from his monitoring station, "the automated systems are reporting full activation across all vessels in our sector. We have 12,000 ships ready for immediate deployment with full crews being awakened from stasis." 12,000 ships from just one sector, and there were 6 sectors total. Santos felt a mixture of pride and concern as she realized the true scope of what humanity had accomplished in secret. The Zaphirians had made a terrible error in their calculations, thinking they were dealing with a typical spacefaring species that built fleets in the dozens or hundreds. They had no understanding of human industrial capacity when fully unleashed. Back on Earth, the full scope of humanity's response took shape in the war rooms beneath the Terran Defense Council. Admiral Baker stood before holographic displays showing the galaxy-wide activation of deep harbor assets and felt something close to awe at what he witnessed. "Colonel Stone," he said to his chief of staff, "I knew we had contingency plans for major conflicts, but this goes beyond anything I imagined possible. We're talking about coordinating 700,000 ships across dozens of different sectors, all converging on Zaphirian space simultaneously." Colonel Helen Stone nodded as she studied tactical displays showing fleet positions throughout the galaxy. "Admiral, the logistics alone are staggering. We're launching the largest military operation in galactic history. Every aspect has been planned and rehearsed, but seeing it actually happen is almost overwhelming." Baker turned his attention to the strategic overview showing Zaphirian-controlled territory. The reptilian aliens governed nearly 400 star systems and maintained a total fleet strength estimated at 45,000 warships. By any normal standard, they were a formidable military power capable of conquering entire regions of space. They were about to face odds of more than 15-1 against an enemy using technology they'd never encountered. "The question isn't whether we can defeat them," Baker said quietly. "The question is whether we can control ourselves once we start winning." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as humanity's true strength revealed itself. Captain Rick Hayes commanded Deep Harbor Omega Sector, the most distant of all hidden fleets positioned near the galactic rim in a region his crews nicknamed the Edge of Forever. "Captain," his tactical officer Lieutenant Amy Collins reported, "long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures throughout human space. Every single Deep Harbor facility is coming online simultaneously." Hayes studied the sensor data, watching as humanity's hidden infrastructure activated after decades of patient preparation. "Amy, send a message to all ship commanders in our sector. Tell them to prepare for extended operations far from home. Where we're going, we won't be returning for quite some time." Amy looked confused by the orders. "Sir, our briefings indicated we'd rendezvous with the main fleet for a coordinated assault on Zaphirian territory." Hayes smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "Those are our official orders, but look at the deployment patterns, Lieutenant. 700,000 ships represents enough firepower to destroy every Zaphirian world multiple times over. Command isn't planning to just win this war. They're planning to end it permanently." As hours passed, the scope of humanity's response became clear even to crews participating in it. This wasn't simply military retaliation for the destruction of New Haven Colony. This was the revelation of humanity's true nature as the most dangerous species in known space. For decades, humans had played the role of a peaceful young civilization, content to farm a few worlds and trade quietly. With their neighbors, they'd attended diplomatic conferences and signed treaties and participated in galactic commerce like any other modest species, trying to find their place among the stars. The destruction of New Haven Colony had ended that performance forever. Commander Susan Phillips led Deep Harbor, Delta Sector, and received her final briefing from Earth Command as her fleet prepared to depart from their hidden anchorage. The top holographic image of Admiral Baker appeared in her ready room, and his expression carried the weight of what was about to unfold. "Susan, your sector will spearhead the assault on the hegemony's core worlds. Our intelligence indicates they're already attempting to mobilize their own fleets in response to our initial movements, but they can't possibly understand what they're facing." Phillips leaned back in her command chair, considering the implications. Admiral, they've never encountered ships using the technology we've developed. Half our weapon systems didn't even exist when we signed the original ceasefire agreement with them. That's exactly what I'm counting on, Baker replied. The Zaphirians believe they struck the first blow in this conflict. They have no idea they just awakened something that's been growing stronger in darkness for 20 years, waiting for exactly this moment. The transmission ended, leaving Phillips alone with her thoughts as she prepared to lead 15,000 ships into battle. Outside her viewport, the vast fleet stretched into the distance like a constellation of metal and fire, ready to bring humanity's judgment to those who dared commit genocide against human civilians. The sleeping giant was awake, and it was hungry for revenge. The Zaphirian Hegemony's capital world of Dracor had stood unconquered for over 3,000 years, and High Admiral Kethvar had never known defeat. The massive orbital defense platforms and planetary shields surrounding his homeworld had weathered attacks from dozens of different alien species, earning the reptilian race a reputation as one of the galaxy's most dangerous military powers. Standing in the central command chamber of Dracor's primary defense station, Kethvar studied sensor readings that challenged everything he thought he understood about human military capabilities. The destruction of New Haven Colony had been executed with clinical precision, and he'd expected the typical response from a minor species bloodied by superior forces. Instead, his intelligence officers were reporting something that seemed impossible. "Admiral!" hissed Sub-Commander Thex Null as his scaled hands worked frantically over sensor controls. The human fleet movements are completely unlike anything in our tactical databases. We're detecting massive energy signatures appearing throughout regions of space we believed empty. Kethvar's clawed fingers drummed against the command console as he processed this information. "Explain what you mean by massive energy signatures." "Sir, our long-range monitoring stations have tracked human space since the New Haven operation began. Initially, we detected expected response patterns with their official fleet elements beginning standard mobilization procedures, perhaps 2,000 ships total moving toward our border regions." The holographic display in the chamber's center updated, showing human-controlled sectors of the galaxy, where previously only a modest scattering of colonies and military bases had been visible. Now vast clusters of energy signatures blazed across darkness like newly born stars. But in the last 18 hours, energy readings have appeared in regions our maps show as uninhabited deep space. The power outputs we're detecting suggest industrial facilities and fleet concentrations on a scale that should be impossible for a species of their limited territorial scope. Kethvar felt something cold settling in his stomach as he studied the display. "How many ships are our sensors currently tracking in human space?" "Admiral, that's the part I find most disturbing. Our current estimates suggest the humans have nearly 700,000 active vessels." The silence that followed was profound and uncomfortable. Around the command chamber, Zaphirian officers stared at the holographic display in disbelief while trying to process numbers representing a fleet larger than the combined navies of the five greatest galactic powers. Kethvar's tactical mind raced through the implications of what his sensors were telling him. If these readings were accurate, then humanity had not simply hidden their true military strength from the galaxy. They'd concealed an industrial capacity that dwarfed anything the hegemony possessed, despite controlling 4 times as much territory. "This must be some form of sensor error or deliberate deception," he said finally. "No species could hide fleet construction and maintenance operations on this scale without detection by our intelligence networks." But even as he spoke the words, Kethvar felt doubt creeping into his thoughts. New reports were flooding in from Zaphirian border stations, and the information they contained was deeply troubling. Human fleets were moving toward hegemony territory, not in scattered defensive groups, typical of a species preparing to protect their colonies, but in massive coordinated formations that suggested decades of careful planning and preparation. Captain Jenny Watson commanded one such formation, leading a battle group of 800 ships that had emerged from what Zaphirian charts showed as empty space in Deep Harbor Gamma sector. Her fleet alone possessed enough firepower to overwhelm the entire border defense network, protecting 3 Zaphirian systems, All ships. This is Captain Watson. She broadcast to her fleet as they approached the edge of hegemony-controlled space. Remember that this operation extends far beyond seeking justice for New Haven Colony. We're here to send a message that will resonate throughout the galaxy for generations to come. Her tactical officer, Commander Alex Morgan, studied the long-range sensor displays showing Zaphirian defensive positions scrambling to respond to approaching human forces. Captain, they appear to be pulling back their forward patrol groups and consolidating around their major population centers. Watson nodded approvingly at this development. Smart tactical thinking, but it won't help them in the end. Alex, transmit our position coordinates to Admiral Baker on Earth. I want command to know that Gamma Sector has reached the designated rally point and is ready to begin operations. Across the galaxy, similar reports flooded back to Earth as humanity's hidden fleets took their assigned positions around Zaphirian space like pieces on a cosmic chessboard. The logistics of coordinating such a massive force across interstellar distances were staggering, but decades of secret planning and preparation had made this moment possible. Admiral Baker stood in the primary command center on Earth, surrounded by holographic displays showing the deployment status of humanity's forces. Each point of light on the tactical overview represented hundreds or thousands of warships, and the combined illumination was almost blinding in its intensity. Status report from all sectors, he called out to his staff officers. Captain Laura Davis, his fleet coordination specialist, consulted her data screens before responding. Sir, we have confirmed deployment from all 6 deep harbor sectors. Total fleet strength currently, positioned around Zaphirian space, stands at 697,000 ships with operational readiness at 98%. Baker allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction as he absorbed these numbers. For over 20 years, he'd been one of the few people who knew about Project Deep Harbor, and the burden of keeping humanity's greatest secret had been enormous. Now seeing the hidden fleets finally deployed felt like watching a masterpiece of strategic planning come to life. Communications. Patch me through to President Collins immediately. The president's image appeared on the main display, and her expression showed the mixture of determination and concern that had defined her leadership since the crisis began. Admiral, are we ready to proceed? Madam President, I've commanded naval forces for 30 years, and I've never seen anything approaching this level of military capability. We have enough concentrated firepower positioned around Zaphirian territory to sterilize their entire civilization. The question we face isn't whether we can achieve victory, but rather how complete we want that victory to be. President Collins stared directly into the camera with eyes reflecting the weight of the decision she was about to make. Admiral, I want you to understand something with absolute clarity. The Zaphirians didn't simply attack New Haven Colony when they murdered 12,000 innocent people. They attacked the fundamental idea that humanity can exist safely in this galaxy. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. That idea dies today along with anyone who threatens human lives. You have full authorization to proceed with Operation Nemesis. Show them what happens when someone attempts to exterminate human beings. Baker felt a chill run down his spine as he received these orders. Operation Nemesis wasn't simply a battle plan for military victory. It was a complete restructuring of galactic power that would establish humanity as the dominant species in known space through the application of overwhelming force. Back on Dracora, High Admiral Kethvar received updated intelligence reports about human fleet positions and felt something he'd never experienced in 50 years of military service. The numbers were beyond anything his strategic training had prepared him to face. His own forces gathered from across the entire hegemony totaled 47,000 ships representing the largest fleet in Zaphirian history against humanity's 700,000. Sir, whispered Subcommander Thex Null, perhaps we should consider opening diplomatic channels. The humans might be willing to negotiate some form of settlement. Kethvar's eyes blazed with fury at the suggestion. The Zaphirian hegemony has never surrendered to an inferior species, and we won't begin now. But even as he spoke these defiant words, Kethvar felt the cold touch of genuine fear. The humans hadn't simply hidden their military strength for decades. They'd spent that time preparing for a war of complete annihilation, and now that war was about to begin. The first shots of what would later be called the Retribution War were fired at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, where a Zaphirian patrol fleet encountered the advanced elements of Captain Watson's battle group. The engagement lasted exactly 14 minutes, and when it was over, the galaxy would never be the same. Commander Kevin Stone led the human vanguard aboard the UES Vengeance and watched through his bridge viewports as Zaphirian vessels simply ceased to exist. They weren't destroyed in the traditional sense of being blown apart by explosions, but rather vaporized by weapons technology the reptilian species had never encountered before. "Sir," called out his weapons officer, Lieutenant Nancy Parker, "the new plasma lance systems are performing beyond all specifications. Each direct hit is completely atomizing their vessels at the molecular level." Stone nodded grimly as he observed the one-sided slaughter taking place in the vacuum around his ship. The weapon systems, equipping humanity's deep harbor fleets, represented 20 years of secret development and testing. While the galaxy had seen humanity's official technology, which was respectable but unremarkable, the hidden fleets carried armaments that bordered on science fiction. "Nancy, signal all ships in the battle group. Maintain attack formation and advance to the next system on our target list. Also, transmit a message to any surviving Zaphirian vessels, the few remaining enemy ships that managed to escape the brief. Engagement would carry word back to their commanders that humanity was no longer hiding its true capabilities from anyone." On Drakor, High Admiral Kethvar received the first battle reports with growing disbelief and mounting terror. His patrol fleets weren't simply being defeated in conventional combat, but were being obliterated with a casual efficiency that defied every principle of interstellar warfare he'd studied. "Admiral," reported Sub-Commander Thex Null, and his scaled face had turned pale with fear. "We've lost contact with 12 patrol groups in the last 6 hours. The few survivors who managed to escape report that human vessels are using completely unknown weapon systems with devastating effectiveness against our forces." Kethvar studied the tactical displays, watching as red markers representing destroyed Zaphirian units multiplied across the border regions like a spreading infection. "What are their fleet compositions in these engagements? How many ships are we facing in each battle?" "Sir, that's part of what makes these reports so difficult to believe. Our surviving scouts report human formations numbering in the thousands of vessels. Each individual engagement involves more ships than we previously believed humanity possessed in their entire military." The magnitude of humanity's deception was becoming clear to Kethvar, and the implications were staggering. For decades, the Zaphirian military had based their strategic planning on the assumption that humans maintained a modest fleet, suitable only for defending their small territorial holdings. The reality that humanity had been secretly building the largest military force in Galactic. History changed every calculation and made every previous assessment completely worthless. But Kethvar was a warrior who'd earned his position through decades of successful campaigns, and warriors didn't retreat from battle regardless of the odds they faced. "Deploy the Second Armada to the border systems immediately. If the humans want a war of annihilation, then we'll give them exactly that." The Zaphirian Second Armada consisted of 12,000 ships, including some of the most advanced and powerful vessels in the Hegemony's entire fleet. Under normal circumstances, it would have been sufficient to conquer half a dozen human colonies and establish complete military dominance over any enemy force. It encountered Captain Santos's Deep Harbor Alpha fleet 6 hours later, and the result would be remembered as the Battle of the Void Nebula. The engagement lasted exactly 37 minutes. Captain Santos commanded 12,000 human vessels against the Zaphirian Armada's 12,000 ships. But the similarity in numbers disguised a massive disparity in technological capability and tactical effectiveness. "All ships, this is Captain Santos," she broadcast to her fleet as they approached the enemy formation. "You're cleared to engage with all available weapon systems. Show them what 20 years of secret preparation and development looks like." The human vessels advanced in perfect coordination, with their targeting systems locking onto enemy ships with mechanical precision that reflected computer-assisted fire control beyond anything the Zaphirians possessed. When the firing began, it looked less like a battle between equal forces and more like a systematic demolition operation. Zaphirian plasma cannons and fusion missiles represented weapons that had dominated galactic warfare for centuries and had proven effective against every enemy the hegemony had ever faced. Against human energy shields and defensive systems, they might as well have been throwing rocks at armored vehicles. In response, human rail cannons firing projectiles at significant fractions of light speed punched through Zaphirian armor plating as if it were made of paper. Energy weapons that drew power directly from miniaturized fusion reactors carved through enemy hulls like cutting tools through soft metal. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Parker from her tactical station, "enemy resistance is collapsing across all engagement zones. We've destroyed approximately 10,000 enemy vessels in the last 30 minutes. Our losses stand at 0 ships with minor damage to 6 vessels." Santos watched the slaughter unfold on her tactical displays with mixed emotions. This was exactly what humanity had prepared for during decades of secret development, but seeing it happen in practice felt almost surreal. The Zaphirians, for all their fearsome reputation as galactic warriors, simply couldn't comprehend the level of technology they were facing. "Signal the surviving enemy ships," she ordered. "Tell them to surrender immediately or be destroyed where they stand." Of the 12,000 ships that had comprised the Zaphirian Second Armada, fewer than 800 survived to retreat back toward their home territory. The message they carried to High Admiral Kethvar was simple and terrifying. Humanity had evolved into something beyond anything the galaxy understood or could effectively resist. Back on Earth, President Collins received the battle reports in her secure briefing room, while Admiral Baker stood beside holographic displays highlighting human victories across dozens of star systems. The scope of their success was almost overwhelming. "Madam President, our forces have achieved complete tactical superiority in every single engagement. Zaphirian losses are approaching 40,000 ships destroyed or disabled. Our casualties remain at exactly 0 vessels lost." Collins absorbed this information with a mixture of satisfaction and growing concern. "Admiral, I want to be absolutely clear about our strategic objectives. This military campaign isn't simply about achieving victory over the Zaphirian hegemony. This is about establishing a psychological impact that will resonate throughout the galaxy for generations." Baker nodded his understanding. "Ma'am, our intelligence networks report widespread panic throughout Zaphirian civilian populations. Their military commands are requesting emergency reinforcements from sectors that have never required defensive preparations before." "Perfect," Collins said as she turned to stare out at Earth's blue sky, where the lights of orbital shipyards were clearly visible even during daylight hours. "But we're not stopping this campaign until every single Zaphirian world understands the price of committing genocide against human beings." The President's words were transmitted through quantum communication networks to every human commander operating in the field. This was no longer simply a military operation designed to achieve limited objectives. This was a complete rewriting of galactic power structures through the application of overwhelming force. Captain Phillips, commanding Deep Harbor Delta Sector, received her updated orders while her fleet approached the heavily fortified Zaphirian stronghold of Thanatos Prime. The system contained massive orbital weapons platforms and was defended by one of the hegemony's most experienced and capable fleets. "All ships," she broadcast to her 15,000 vessels, "we're authorized to proceed with maximum force against all military targets. The enemy chose to make this a war of extermination when they murdered innocent civilians at New Haven Colony. Now they'll learn what human extermination looks like." Her fleet advanced on Thanatos Prime like an unstoppable tide of metal and destruction. The Zaphirian defenders, despite their advantages in defensive positions and fortified installations, lasted less than 2 hours against weapons and tactics they had no way to counter. As Phillips watched the last enemy orbital platform explode in brilliant silence, she realized that humanity had crossed a line from which there could be no return. The galaxy would never again see humans as a peaceful young species content with farming a few worlds and trading quietly with their neighbors. From this moment forward, they'd be recognized as the most dangerous military force in known space. And the war was only beginning. 6 months after the destruction of New Haven Colony, High Admiral Kethvar stood in the ruins of his command center on Dracor, watching his world burn from orbit. The planets, mighty orbital defense platforms that had protected the Zaphirian homeworld, for 3,000 years now floated as twisted metal debris around the once proud capital of the hegemony. The human armada hung in space above Dracor like a mechanical constellation of death and destruction. 700,000 ships arranged in perfect formation created a sight so overwhelming that most citizens had simply stopped looking up at their sky. Of his once mighty fleet of 47,000 warships, fewer than 2,000 remained operational, and most of those were damaged beyond any hope of effective combat. "Admiral!" whispered Subcommander Thex Null in a voice that carried the weight of absolute defeat. "The humans are requesting your presence aboard their flagship for what they call final negotiations." Kethvar straightened his ceremonial armor one last time, knowing that in all his years of military service, he'd never been forced to surrender to an enemy force. Today, he would learn what total defeat felt like and how it would change everything he believed about war and power in the galaxy. The human flagship was a vessel unlike anything in Zaphirian experience or understanding. The UES Liberation stretched for kilometers through space and bristled with weapon systems that seemed to defy the basic laws of physics. Admiral Baker waited in the ship's main conference room surrounded by holographic displays showing the current state of galactic affairs. "High Admiral Kethvar," Baker said as the Zaphirian commander entered the room. "Please sit down. We have many important things to discuss about the future." Kethvar remained standing because his warrior pride prevented him from showing any sign of weakness, even in the face of complete defeat. "I assume you wish to discuss the terms and conditions of our formal surrender." Baker smiled, but the expression contained no warmth or mercy. "Actually, I want to discuss something much more significant than surrender. You see, Admiral, this war was never really about New Haven Colony or even about punishing the Zaphirian Hegemony for committing genocide against human civilians." The human admiral activated holographic displays that showed the current strategic situation throughout the galaxy. Zaphirian space, which had once been a dominant force controlling hundreds of star systems, now existed only because humanity allowed it to continue existing. Human fleets had occupied every major Zaphirian world and had disabled every significant military installation while effectively ending Zaphirian influence as a meaningful galactic power. The speed and completeness of this transformation was staggering, even to those who'd witnessed it happening. For 30 years, Baker continued, humanity pretended to be a minor species with limited territorial ambitions and modest military capabilities. We allowed other races throughout the galaxy to believe we were restricted by small populations and inadequate industrial resources. Do you understand why we maintained this deception for so long? Kethvar remained silent, but his reptilian features showed growing comprehension of the scope of humanity's strategic planning. Because we were studying all of you, learning your technologies and your tactics, and most importantly, your weaknesses. Every diplomatic contact and every trade negotiation and every cultural exchange was actually an intelligence-gathering operation designed to prepare for this moment. The full magnitude of humanity's deception was becoming clear to Kethvar as he realized that everything the Zaphirians thought they knew about human capabilities had been carefully crafted lies. Baker continued speaking, and each word drove home the reality of how completely they'd been outmaneuvered. While you believed you were dealing with eager young mammals trying to find their proper place among their betters, we were cataloging everything we needed to know to defeat every major galactic power simultaneously if necessary. Captain Watson entered the conference room wearing the insignia of the newly created human expansion fleet which had been formed to govern the territories that humanity was claiming throughout former Zaphirian space. "Admiral Baker," she reported, "the Galactic Council has formally accepted our terms without modification. Humanity will be granted permanent controlling seats on all major ruling committees, and our territorial claims throughout this entire region have been officially recognized by every major galactic power." Baker nodded to Watson, then turned back to face Kethvar with an expression that mixed satisfaction with something approaching pity. "You see, Admiral, your attack on New Haven Colony accomplished exactly what we hoped it would accomplish. It provided us with perfect justification to reveal our true military strength and claim our rightful position as the dominant galactic power." The Zaphirian commander felt his world collapsing around him as the implications of Baker's words sank into his consciousness. "You wanted us to attack your colony. You deliberately provoked this war." "We needed someone to attack us," Baker corrected. We simply didn't expect it to be the Zaphirian Hegemony. Frankly, we thought you possessed better strategic judgment than to give us such a perfect opportunity. President Collins's image appeared on the main display screen, and her address was being broadcast simultaneously to dozens of worlds throughout the galaxy. Her words would be remembered as the moment when humanity stepped out of the shadows and announced its true intentions to every species in known space. Citizens of the galaxy, she began. 6 months ago, the Zaphirian Hegemony chose to test humanity's resolve by committing genocide against 12,000 innocent civilians at New Haven Colony. Today, the Zaphirian Hegemony no longer exists as a significant military power in this galaxy. The holographic displays showed human fleet positions throughout former Zaphirian territory, and their presence served as a permanent reminder that the balance of galactic power had shifted permanently in humanity's favor. Let me be absolutely clear to every species watching this broadcast. Humanity seeks peaceful coexistence and mutually beneficial relationships with all galactic civilizations. But if you choose to threaten human lives or test our determination, you'll face the same fate that befell the Zaphirian Hegemony. Collins paused to let her words sink in across dozens of worlds where alien leaders were frantically reassessing their relationships with humanity. What you've witnessed over the past 6 months represents only a small fraction of our true military capabilities. Our shipyards continue operating and our fleets continue growing and our territorial influence continues expanding throughout this galaxy. There's room for all of us to prosper together, but there's no room for anyone to threaten humanity without facing immediate and overwhelming consequences. Back aboard the Liberation, Admiral Baker dismissed Kethvar with final instructions about the future. You'll be transported to a detention facility where you'll be treated according to established galactic conventions regarding prisoners of war. Your people will be allowed to rebuild their civilization under human oversight and guidance. Consider yourselves fortunate that we chose restraint rather than complete annihilation. As the defeated Zaphirian commander was escorted away, Captain Santos approached Baker with casualty reports from the entire campaign. Admiral, the final numbers from all engagements show total Zaphirian losses at over 43,000 ships destroyed and approximately 2 million military personnel killed or captured. Human losses remain at 0 ships destroyed and fewer than 60 crew members killed in minor accidents. Baker reviewed these numbers with deep satisfaction. Maria, what do you think the other major galactic powers are thinking about these results? Santos looked out at the vast human armada that surrounded Dracor like a metal ocean. Sir, I believe they're wondering what other secrets we've been keeping hidden from them. Baker smiled genuinely for the first time in months. Excellent. Let them wonder and worry. Fear has always been a much more effective diplomatic tool than friendship or trust. In the months that followed, the galaxy adjusted to its new reality under human dominance. Human colonies expanded rapidly into former Zaphirian territory, protected by fleets that dwarfed anything previously imagined. Trade agreements were renegotiated, with humanity holding vastly more favorable terms, while defensive pacts were signed as other species sought to align themselves with the galaxy's newest and most powerful ruler. The name New Haven Colony was inscribed on monuments throughout human space, not as a symbol of tragedy and loss, but as a reminder of what happened when someone made the mistake of underestimating humanity's capacity for both patience and terrible vengeance. Admiral Phillips now commanded the permanent human garrison fleet stationed throughout former Zaphirian territory and stood on her flagship bridge watching construction crews building new human settlements on worlds where Zaphirian warriors had once planned campaigns of conquest against inferior species. President Collins appeared on her communication screen with a final message that would define humanity's future role in galactic affairs. Admiral Phillips, I want to personally thank you and every member of your command for establishing humanity as the dominant power in this galaxy through your courage and determination. Phillips nodded respectfully. Thank you, Madam President. But I have to ask what comes next. The galaxy knows about Deep Harbor now.